Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our series of Radical Thoughts on Innovation. I'm Maya Barber, and as always, I'm here with my co host, John Hall, and our special guest, James Intriligator. James, I want to start off by asking you, how do you see the balance evolving between AI driven systems and human intuition and decision making over the next 5 years?
That's a great question. First, thanks for having me here. From my perspective, it's really going to depend a lot on the specific use cases, right? So, automation of simple tasks, humans will be sort of out of the loop on those kinds of things. There's no reason to keep a human involved if it's something that a machine can just, process bills, for instance, or simple chatbot responses, things like that. As you move up to kind of more creative and, well, more risky, dangerous things, for instance, you always probably want to keep a human in the loop. And so it'll be hard to know where that line is. Currently, it's a really kind of blurry boundary because every day the AIs seem to be getting better at all kinds of different things. And so they're taking over more and more of the kind of tasks that humans used to be required for, as everyone kind of knows. So I think that it's hard to say exactly where it will go. From my perspective, there's a lot of things, especially in the world of like innovation, new product design, new systems design, new ad campaigns, all these kinds of different areas where AI is great at putting together possibilities and helping you gain some insights across broad fields of information, but it's not so great at making the right choice. Like I run training classes on how to use AI for innovation. And one of the examples I use is, you can say to ChatGPT, let's say, or any LLM, I want a great chocolate recipe, or I want a great vegan chocolate cake recipe. I'm having people over, someone's vegan, and it'll say, okay, here's a great vegan chocolate cake recipe, which is fine, and it might be a good recipe. It's much better if you kind of leave you yourself, the human, in the loop, and you say, hey, I want a chocolate cake recipe, a vegan chocolate cake. Of course, you could say, here's some things I have at home. I know that this person has a nut allergy, whatever you want. But you could, at the end of all that, you could say, can you please give me outlines of 5 possible recipes I might want to use? Because it's always a probabilistic machine, right? It's generating possibilities. It never gives the right answer. It gives you a range of answers. And so that's kind of the easiest way to just kind of leave the human involved. You don't let the machine give you the best recipe. You say, hey, give me 5 recipes that you think might be the best. And then I, as the human, will say, hey, I kind of like recipe number 2 and number 5. Can you come up with 5 hybrids of those two and show me those? And oh, that's pretty good. And you can say, oh, I like number 1, but I don't like using soy milk. Can you put something else in, whatever it might be? So I think that for those kinds of things, even that simple example kind of shows you ways that the human stays involved. Like you could just cede all creative control to it, but it'll probably miss the mark quite often. It could always do better if you bring a bit of human insight into it.
You kind of already touched on it, but are there any other domains that you think humans take the edge from with AI?
Whew, that's a good question. I mean, it kind of depends how you think about it, right? So, market research, AI can do a pretty good job. It can take tons of data and kind of synthesize it. But again, it doesn't have much human sense. It's getting more human sense. Again, it's one of these things where it's hard to know where the boundary will be there. Um, but often you need sort of a human empathy, human kind of intuition to kind of play a part in things like customer research, need finding, things like that. Like need finding, hey, I want to make a new, let's say, a new type of hammer that I think the market might need. Can you identify the possible needs in the hammer space or whatever it is? And it can come up with some stuff, but it's kind of just looking across the internet and across all of the stuff it has, been trained on everything in there and trying to identify needs. And that's fine. It will find the needs, but it probably needs a bit of human nudging as well. Hey, I saw this interesting thing. It inspired some ideas. Or what if we were to bring into this hammer space concepts that come from, some other field entirely? Consider the process of baking. There's lots of tools that are used in baking. How could maybe baking inform hammer design? Again, it's kind of humans often are pretty good. Even the most powerful LLMs now are not even close to actually technically. I've heard some people say that they aren't even as computationally powerful as just what happens between 2 neurons in your brain. Because we always think that the neuron is the basic unit, but one neuron firing to the next is actually, they have to go across this thing, the synaptic cleft. And in that little area, there's incredible computation that happens. So anyway, human brains are still pretty good at kind of having hunches and hints. And so the AIs are getting close, but I mean, in some sense, they're getting close at big data computation. But in terms of creativity and insight and broader innovation, I think there's still a long way to go till they catch up to us. They're great at going possibilities. So, hey, give me 10 options for hammerish things I might want to do. And to me, that's the other thing that I find useful is that they can then inspire new ideas in the human, right? So if I say, hey, I'm coming up trying to come up with a new hammer, give me 10 ideas for directions I might want to consider. And you may not follow any of those 10, but just looking at those 10 ideas will kind of inspire new ideas in you, the human. You can say, hey, I sort of like that. And these two sort of played in this space. Can you give me 10 ideas in that space? And the metaphor I always use is that I like to think of generative AI, LLMs, as kind of conceptual gliders. They can take you into any space you want to go into, and they're not going there to kind of find an answer. They're like cars, right? I mean, in some sense, you could use a car to get to a location, but often you're kind of the journey is the more interesting part. And to me, that's kind of where ChatGPT, Claude, all of these LLM agents really have their powers that they can help take you into any conceptual space you want. I want hammers meets vegan cakes meets whatever you want, and it'll take you into any space you can define. And that's to me that's a really rich playground for human creativity.
I want to pick up on your point about sort of the human and AI collaborate, human and AI collaboration. I mean, is there an example from your work where you've seen the power of that collaboration getting results that you wouldn't have gotten if it was just, humans going off on their own or AI going off on its own? Is there anything specific you kind of talk us about?
That is an interesting question. So there are just tons of areas where I have found it incredibly useful to be like I said, sort of a glider, a conceptual explorer, something that takes you into new spaces. So uh, I guess I can give examples from lots of different aspects of my life. So I do a lot of teaching as well. So I
Hmm.
have been kind of totally revising and changing my lectures based on some AI feedback. Here's my syllabus. Here are the assignments. Here are the slides that I'm about to use for this lecture I'm going to give today. I'd like you to come up with two specific in-class discussion topics I could have that would really foster interesting discussion and get students really engaged. And it comes up with great ideas. It's the kind of thing where if I had spent a lot of time and spent some time thinking and researching, I might have come up with stuff. But I also think, and again, this may just be me, but to me, my time is pretty limited and pretty valuable. And, yeah, I could go and read dozens of books on best practices in teaching and in this particular area and come up with something, but I'd rather kind of just let it do that. I mean,
Hmm.
the ideas it has aren't like revolutionary world changing, but just fabulous ideas for in-class things. Same with like I give it my syllabus before the semester. I say, I'd like to incorporate some things more around sort of social justice and universal design, issues that tend to get overlooked in product design. In that particular case is the class that I was teaching. And it does a great job. Hey, here's some reading that would be good to incorporate into that class. And here's an in-class activity you could have people do. So that's just kind of the teaching world. I've also been doing a lot of work on sort of behavior change interventions,
Hmm.
come up with a new way to help reduce cancer rates in rural communities. And, again, it's the kind of thing where if I got together a group of experts and we spend time thinking about rural communities and what happens there, and what kinds of cancer are prevalent there, what kind of behavior change techniques tend to work in those intersectional spaces, we could, spend a couple weeks and maybe come up with something, or you could just ask ChatGPT to come up with some
Yeah.
outlines of ideas for the kinds of things you might do. And, again, it's rare that it gives me in those kind of use cases the right answer right off, but it'll give you some five pretty good ones, and then you can kind of glide into one. I like the way you're going with this idea number one, but it overlooks the lack of the food deserts that you might find in rural communities. You forgot about that. Can you try to bring that into the equation? And it'll kind of help you do the kind of design creativity that humans are naturally good at, but kind of powered by AI.
Hmm. I mean, are there any challenges in that integration or things, watch outs that you think people should be aware of as they try to, master that collaboration, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there is, of course, people say, you got to be careful. It hallucinates and it makes things
Right.
up. And I always like to say that's literally all it ever does. It really is just a text generating machine, right? I used to have in my talks, I had a picture of a little wind up robot. You put it down and it leaves text behind it because that's really all it is. It's just leaving streams of text. It doesn't know anything about what that text is. It's just symbols. It could be alien things. It's just good at putting down symbols that we as humans can interpret. So that means, yeah, it's always making things up, but it it's always making things up based on a true story, based on some facts, based on something it knows, but it's always based on something. So you have to be really careful that if it comes up with an idea and it should work, it could just be it may have missed something entirely, or it's often the mistake I often find is that it's trying to please me, the user. It's always trying to do what you ask it to do. So like if I say, you know, I believe James Intriligator wrote a paper about the history of jousting in the in the Middle Ages. What was that reference? It'll say, oh, it must have been Intriligator and Smith, and it'll pull in some of my previous co-authors, and it'll make up something that sounds real. But it's because I've sort of painted it into a corner. I've said there is
Hmm.
this thing. Tell me what it is. And so if I say there is this awesome product that will help airplane pilots do whatever it is, it'll say, oh, here it is, and it may not do it. There may not be a possibility of doing what it says it can do, but you've asked it to do it. So that's the one really biggest warning is you got to be careful about and double check everything it says. If there's anything it says that's important, um, or that you're going to make major decisions, investment decisions, life death situations, medical decisions, just double check anything it does. So I guess that's one of the tips, and there are some others. I mean, I guess the other thing is to remember it is a probabilistic engine, and it's always giving, the stream of words it gives is a bit of a dice throw at every word, at every token, technically. So um, you should never trust it to get the right answer, but it's going to be pretty good if you ask it for a range of answers. So that's another thing that I find people often mistake. They go in and they kind of have one path and they kind of get stuck going down that one path because they only ask for one step in the path rather than say, hey, where we are now, can you give me 5 possible steps or give me 3 possibilities? And then that keeps the human involved and kind of keeps it a bit closer to reality in some sense.
Hmm.
So following up on that, James, what do you see as the biggest risk when companies rely too heavily on AI? And how can like human oversight mitigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I mean, AI does tend to often have a bit of a kind of a narrow focus, right? If you've set up a chatbot to respond to things, it'll respond to those things. And companies love to have something that is sort of a standalone module they can put out in the world and it'll just do its thing. And in AI, it's never quite that easy. It's always statistical, probabilistic. It could start recommending people do dangerous things, so you have to be a little careful of that. So those are some of the things that I think will always require humans to stay involved with. But at the same time, I think companies, uh, one of the mistakes I've seen, so many companies are looking for an AI solution, like something that will do everything for them. And there just isn't. It's like, I want a person who could do every role in my company. It's like, well, you're not going to find a person to do all of that. But if you could train up people on how to collaborate better, or if you could get an AI, basically where I'm going is companies should not be looking for an AI solution to something. Rather, they should be, I think, and again, I'm a bit biased, but I think they should be training up their employees on how to use AI, how to think about AI. They're the ones who are going to have to use it, and they're the ones who are going to be, they are the most valuable asset that any company has in some sense. And so the company should be investing in teaching their employees really how to use it creatively, how to use it to do all kinds of different stuff. Because the humans in the company are going to come up with wonderful new possibilities that no system that a company sells you will be able to do as well as your employees can in many cases. So I would say that would be the other thing companies should be aware of. Did I answer
Yeah,
that
I want to
question?
kind of pick up on this whole point of creativity, and the role AI has in the creative process. Because I mean, to me, to some extent, I feel it's very much of a highly effective search and reapply tool. But I'm wondering, what thoughts you have on how we could really use it to augment human creativity, and some of it may be just how you are asking it. Don't give me a single answer, but
Yeah.
how would you say to get the most out of it as a creative tool? How would you say we should be using it?
Uh, That's a great question. So, I mean, I guess again, my my metaphor I always use is the idea of it being a glider.
Hmm.
And if you're looking to have a glider that can get you places that are creative and innovative and game changing, or whatever terms you want to use, you need to make sure that that glider understands a lot about the space. So, if you just open up a new conversation, a new chat inside of ChatGPT or Claude, any of those things, it kind of knows everything. I mean, it's been exposed to everything. It can generate all kinds of stuff, which is good. But if you're interested in, let's say you want to come up with a new toy that kids can use with dogs, making up something, that's great. You could say, hey, I want to come up with a new toy that kids could use with dogs, and it'll do something there, but it won't, it tends to think about toys, kids, and dogs as kind of generic placeholders. Those are just words. It doesn't really know much about kids. I mean, it knows, in some sense, it has in its brain all knowledge about kids in some weird way, but most of it tends to be sort of implicit. It tends to be hidden inside of its networks. And if it doesn't need to dig deep to find an answer, it won't. It'll say kids, dogs, toys, how about a ball? How about it'll
Mhm.
come up with some kind of generic names. And people often complain that they only give generic answers. They're basically stochastic parrots. They're giving you what's out there. And it's because people tend to ask dumb questions. They ask the question that it can answer at a surface level, so it will. Instead, what you should be doing is saying, okay, think about kids. Kids do all kinds of things. Kids have things they love to do, things they hate to do. They have fears, they have aspirations. Think everything about kids and kind of enrich that space and tell me all about kids, but I want you to dig deep. In fact, one of the tricks that I sort of discovered is you can ask it to do clustering. You can say, think all about kids and create 5 clusters that capture everything about kids. And the trick there is that when you ask it to create these clusters, you don't tell it how to cluster. So you could say cluster them into, medical and recreational and nutritional needs, but you don't. But instead, you say, think about kids and create 5 clusters that capture all the information in kids' space. In fact, do it so that they're the optimal clusters. And that's an interesting thing. It was kind of a random insight I had years ago when I was trying to think, how can I get it to really think deeply? And I realized that like to cluster stuff without giving it the dimensions, it's going to have to dig into every aspect. Like if I say, I always use the example of kittens. Let's say I had 20 kittens and I say, cluster them into the 3 best groups that explain everything about them. You'll have to go, well, they're different sizes. Maybe it's size, they're different colors, they have different personalities, they're different breeds. This one likes to eat the food left, right? You have to kind of, you don't know where to begin. And so you have to kind of figure out everything about cats in order to come up with a decent first guess. And it's the same with anything. So if you want your conversation to not just use the surface level representation of a kid, but instead to really know, you could say, hey, consider kids, cluster everything about them. Now that particular conversation suddenly knows all about kids. It understands, their appetites, their desires, everything. And now it's great. And you can do the same thing for dogs and for games. And once you've done that, you've created a very rich space where now it won't just give you kind of generic, easy answers. It'll actually start to be creative. There's all kinds of games you could play. You could even ask it to think about the nature of creativity, right? Create
Mhm.
5 clusters that capture all about creativity. Now come up with a creative, innovative new product that would appeal to kids, and you can get much more specific, right? So consider the market of dog toys, think about the demographics and psychographics of all the people who buy dog toys, come up with 5 different personas and identify which one is the fastest growing market currently. It's good at data. It'll say, oh, this is the one, and which one has fewest competitors. Oh, these 2 are the best. Okay, now think about what kind of things would kids of people, parents in that market. Anyway, so if you go that direction, you'll get incredible answers. I mean, it's just unbelievable how innovative and creative it can get if you know how to, I like to say, if you know how to pilot the glider, right? You can't just ask it simple questions or it'll give you simple answers. It's kind of a
That's great. I
dark.
mean, and that does go back to the whole point we talked about earlier about the human and AI collaboration. I mean, that you've really got to have kind of engaged that conversation to really get it to give you something that's going to be potentially breakthrough.
Yeah, I've been trying to get my university to start a new graduate certificate called Prompt Engineering for the Humanities or Prompt
Hmm.
Engineering for English Majors. And I have this weird image that you could imagine 5 years from now, computer scientists just can't get good jobs, but English majors are getting offered 250,000 a year starting salaries because they're the ones who know how to kind of work in these ambiguous conceptual spaces, right?
Hmm.
In general, I found the talks by computer scientists about generative AI have been sort of the worst. It's almost like they know too much about what's happening under the surface and they don't realize. It's like, talking to an engine mechanic about how to drive a car. They just don't know. It's almost like don't talk to a computer scientist if you want to know how to use an LLM because they don't really know how to use an LLM. They know how an LLM works.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that having more, which also, by the way, speaks to the question of what kinds of people will be effective innovators using AI. And again, I think it's expertise. That's one thing you need, right? You need, like, I can't make up new dog toys. I mean, I could, but I'd much rather have someone with me who knows about dog toys and knows the history of dog toys and who could also spot what it's saying right now isn't true. Someone tried that
Hmm.
product, it didn't work. So you kind of need a, it's not just one human and an AI. You kind of need a couple of experts, someone who knows a bit about brainstorming, about innovation, innovation processes. You kind of need a couple of people pulled together who can fly that. The metaphor is going to fall apart, but who can fly that thing much better, right? One person, an AI on its own can't do it. One human and an AI can do stuff, but if you can bring in some expertise from different directions and different dimensions, then you can really get some fabulous, innovative ideas.
That's
So
great.
with so with that and how teams are structured within an organization, how do you think teams should be structured, meaning like skills, roles, processes to maximize the best efforts when it comes to AI innovation tools?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, again, it depends. If is the company really like just an innovation company? Like, is that what they're doing, innovation, or are they just a company that's making a product or a range of products and they want to come up with innovative new products? Because the way you kind of, in some cases, if you're doing radical innovation, you don't necessarily need everyone in the company to become radical innovators and know how to use AI to do radical innovation. There is still a role for human expertise. Like if you're an expert on, a particular aspect of manufacturing, for instance. I mean, AIs know about manufacturing. You can ask it to help you come up with the manufacturing process or the partners, distribution networks that would help make your dog toy, whatever it was on, a success. But that internal expertise, I think, is always going to be pretty important. What you need are like if you wanted to build up the capability inside of a company, you need to have a couple of people who sort of know how to fly LLMs or know how to use generative AI more broadly. Because of course, there's also, lots of graphical generators and things like that, which again are fabulous at inspiring human ideas. So I guess I would think it's good for everyone in the company to have a sense of how to use LLMs, generative AI, whatever type of AI that you're interested in. Everyone should have a passive familiarity just to know the strengths, weaknesses, etc. But then there probably should be some sort of experts who are good at working with. They almost, I sometimes think of myself as kind of the pilot of the plane, but I need a co-pilot and I need a navigator. I need experts, people who know about dogs and toys or whatever it might be. And so I think that that same kind of model could be brought into companies that they should, if they want to do kind of AI informed innovation, that's great. Everyone should know a little bit about AI and how to use it for innovative stuff. And again, the innovative stuff, by the way, could be, I'm an invoice processing person in the company. My job will probably disappear soon, but even still, I could be using AI to do my job more effectively, right? I could figure out, okay, can you help me come up with a way that you could actually use AI to figure out how to do boring, monotonous tasks more effectively as well. So, I mean, I think everyone should have some understanding of what they can do with AI and how to use it innovatively. But companies might, if they do want to build up the capability in-house, they should probably have a team or a few people who know how to use AI to kind of do radical innovation, let's say, or whatever it might be.
That's fascinating. And if you think about, how much AI has evolved so quickly, I mean, are there any breakthroughs or emerging trends you're aware of that really get you excited about, the opening up those innovation possibilities for humans? Anything that you see sort of on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, there's some fabulous and really interesting things that are happening out there. One area that's become sort of hot in some of the worlds I work in are, and again, it's controversial, but like synthetic humans. So
Mhm.
there are now actually Google makes one called Google Stacks, STAX, I think it's spelled, and there you can, if you have a product you want to test, you can say, okay, I want to test it with like an engineer who's age 60, and I want to test it with a Gen Zer of this. And so, LLMs are great at creating, how would a person who was a Gen Z who never, how would they interpret this product? So,
Mhm.
and you can't trust it again, but it'll probably do a pretty good job of giving some initial feedback. So I think kind of rapid prototyping, rapid iteration with synthetic humans or synthetic
Hmm.
agents, they're sometimes called. That's an area that I think will be interesting from an innovation perspective. How would this group of people, what would they need from this product? So that's an interesting area that's just starting to build up. There are, let's see, what are some of the other interesting areas that I've bumped into? There's kind of more powerful, specialized tools. There's some wonderful things that help people write better or make better websites. And I have a lot of students who go off in UI UX world, and Figma has been the ruling king for all UI UX design recent for the last I don't know, for 5 or 6 years at least. And now there's AI stuff that's kind of stepping in there. So I think that's another kind of the more specialized AI agents that can do things like that. Same with software coding. A lot of developers, people now can do vibe coding, as they call it, or no code development, and that works pretty well. But if you're a real programmer, kind of like a pilot who knows, that metaphor is going to fall apart, but they can actually program much better, much faster, much more effectively by using these specialized AI coding co-pilot tools. There's one called
Hmm.
Copilot, actually, of course, and that those again are examples of kind of deep vertical expertise built into an AI system. Same if you go to the other end of the spectrum, like in the world of engineering, there's lots of new materials being designed by AIs, and it's not really ChatGPT or Claude that's doing it. It's models that have been trained on lots of materials data engineering, finding new medicines, new proteins. I mean, there's these kind of deep vertical expertise AI. We're going to see a lot more of that. I also am excited to see, I don't know when it'll happen, but I've been working for a while on coming up with better user interfaces. I mean, right
Hmm.
now it's all text. It's almost like back in the 90s or whatever. And, it was all, or earlier, like when I first was using computers, it was all command lines and you just had to type, run program. And now there's GUIs, there's graphical user interfaces, mouse and windows and stuff. And it's funny because the world of generative AI, at least in the LLM world, has gone way back to this pure text input. And I think there'll be interesting opportunities and new developments as you start to get graphical user interfaces wrapped around some of these things. So I think that's another direction that'll be fascinating to look at. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's a few others I've forgotten, but those are some that come to mind.
And we're getting close to time here, but I want to end this off with asking, what advice would you give leaders who are hesitant about AI? And how can they start small but meaningfully integrate AI without disrupting human value?
That's a good question too. I mean, I guess the thing is they they really should find someone who knows how to use AI and just have that person show them what they can do with it. I think most people have sort of made the mistake of just going and trying it out themselves and getting either frustrated or disappointed. Like if you're a deep expert in financial stuff, if you're a chief financial officer for an organization and you go and try out ChatGPT to give you some financial advice, you'll be really disappointed and you'll say, it's just shallow. It doesn't really get it. But again, it's because you don't know how to use it as a CFO. But if you can find someone who knows how to use it and can start to show you what it can do, I think that's what leaders should do right now is try to find people who can show them how they can use it for their specific needs, right? So if you're a CFO or if you're innovation officer, if you're a new product, if you're a user experience, whatever role you're in at your company or whatever kind of domain your company plays in, whether it's products, digital stuff, whatever you're doing, try to find some people who know how to use it and do interesting stuff in that space, just so you can see the range of possibilities. I think one of the mistakes that a lot of companies have been making is that they are selling kind of a one size fits all solution, right? So software package that will help you do radical innovation or that will help you do UI UX design. And down the road, those will be good. But right now, most individuals in companies, most leaders have specific needs, and a lot of these kind of generic one size fits all packages can't do it. ChatGPT and other language-based ones, because they are language, you can sort of ask it anything. They can actually impress if you kind of find the right way to use it. So I'd say don't just go try out ChatGPT and get disappointed, but spend some time digging into it or find others on LinkedIn or wherever who have used it to do some cool stuff. Like, if you're chief financial, go and find there will be a LinkedIn user group for CFOs using AI and go look at some of the stuff that people in your position are doing with it. And I think you'll see that there's got to be something here. Like people are finding a lot of value in it. So yeah, I would say, find out what people in your role, in your industry are doing with it that's interesting. And if you can't find people like that, find people who are doing really cool stuff with it and just see if you can kind of make a parallel. Okay, how can I do something like that in my world?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, thank you, James. We really enjoyed your time today. And thank you guys for tuning in. Stay tuned for next month's episode of Radical Thoughts on Innovation. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.